she opened a portal that showed all these shapes that were beyond 3 dimensions, colors beyond what I could see with my eyes, like sounds that I have never been able to reproduce. And it was so profound, so amazing. And there was an inner peace that was had at that moment, knowing that she was not actually gone. She was just in a different frequency or a different reality. And I said, "Mom, are you in heaven?" She's like, "I'm in the afterlife." And I didn't understand any of this, but I knew she was there.
Oh, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here.
Nice, nice. My intention for today is that, well, there's two things. One, you haven't been on for a while. And since then, my YouTube channel has been growing considerably. And I really...
Are you saying that's because I haven't been on? Is there a correlation there?
Yeah, what have I done?
Well,
Stop.
yeah.
No, but secondly is that I wanted to, I get to work with you all the time, mate. And I really get to, I feel like I know you like a brother in some respects, and what you've been through, your passion with the work and the very things that you do intuitively and with sound is phenomenal, and the impact that you have at people. So my intention is to really bring light to your journey and to the work that you do for everyone out there that's not familiar with your work. Yeah. So with that in said, why change the format of a podcast? And if you were at an intimate dinner party and somebody said what you do for a living, how would you respond?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I do, having worked with you all the time, it's like, it's not an issue to have a conversation like this, but being on the camera and like framing this around, deepening the exposure of my journey and what's there, it's made me pretty nervous, to be honest. So
that's a good place to be.
Yeah, it's stretching me. This is exciting. I'm looking forward to see what comes out of my mouth. So if I was at a dinner party, it's, yeah, I guess I would simply say I help people access the truth of who they are and express it fully into their lives through the power of sound and breath. Like, that's the crux of it. And usually that's just where the conversation stops. It's like, what is this guy on about? But when it goes on, I'll deepen it and explain more in depth what that means and looks like.
Of course. Well, let's go there for a little bit, because I want to really dive into your journey and your own kind of awakening to spirituality. But with sound and breath, in layman's terms, how is that an access point to helping people really understand who they truly are?
Well, I feel like what I've come to understand over exploring different modalities and techniques and cultures and so forth is that, and what science is now showing, you've had a lot of guys on your podcasts and women as well that are bringing the science forward as to what the mystics have been talking about for millennia. And that's that all of what we experience with our 5 senses is, and beyond that, is just vibration or frequency. And that I feel like we're all just an extension of consciousness, and consciousness extends itself or expresses itself through vibration or frequency. And so in essence, that is what we are. And when we come into the body, into our minds, into our environment that we're accustomed to, conditioned into, we forget the fact that we are actually in this vibration, this kind of divine harmony of life, of consciousness that's wanting to move through us and around. It is moving around us. You see it in nature, how it just flows, and there's harmonies, there's rhythms, there's beats, there's music. And we, as a human race, have almost just hit the mute button on our song that was wanting to sing through us. And I feel there's different songs. You see this in different cultures. The indigenous people of this land would sing, and what I mean by sing is like consciously help co-create the evolution of the planet through their intention, through their ceremonies, through their dance, through their rhythm, through their culture. We've lost all that. We've divorced ourselves from that, and then we wonder why we're stuck and stagnant. And so, to me, the simple act of breath is the basis of it all. Breathing. The first thing you do when you come in is you inhale. The last thing you do when you go out is you exhale. So in essence, life is one big breath. And in there's a rhythm as well. So there's a song, there's a beat, there's a rhythm. And then if you look at the expression of, anything that you want to express in life comes through your voice, whether it's vocally or consciously expressed out. And that is infused with the breath. And you'll see in many cultures and practices that it's not just oxygen exchange, it's the prana, it's the life force, it's the energy that's moving through that. And so as I started to explore my own journey, I started to unpack the holding, the muting within myself. I realized that as I opened my breath, I was able to open my voice. And not only just the expression of the voice coming out of my vocal cords, which, sits on top of the breath. So obviously you open the breath, you're going to open the voice. But also then the way that I meet people, the way that I relate to people, the way that I meet my life and relate to my life, and the way that everything just kind of rolls on from that, ripples out from that. And so in essence, it's like going back to the foundation of, are you in harmony with the rhythm of your breath and authentically expressing your unique voice into the world? Because then that brings you into your true expression, your soul purpose, and then everything will start to move. So it's a very long-winded kind of cyclical answer to that question, but in essence, it's like it's going back to the source. If breath is everything, so breath and express, and your life will transform.
Yes. And if you ponder on like you say, the pace of life, I do wonder how many people actually stop and simply connect to their bodies, to attune, to even realize their tone of voice. What words are they using to describe things? What, are they aware that their heart is beating? Are their lungs moving in and out in breath? Like, we're so outwardly focused, we don't even stop to tune in and actually listen to what our body is wanting to communicate with us and share with us. And we generally mute that, like you say, to continue the pace of life, of how we live. And then lean into these tools as a crutch more than a way of being to support ourselves moving forward when experiencing them.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
and the tools, they actually can also become just more wood on the fire, so to speak, because we're so out of balance, and then we take that out of balance perception, and we then, we're driven, we're goal focused, we're task orientated, and to bring that into meditation, into sound healing, into all the work that we do, then gives it a skewed vantage point, and we're actually then just doing more stuff to distract ourselves from the disharmony that we are holding within, instead of resolving it and dropping in and being present to something as simple as the breath.
Yeah. Well, let's rewind back. Let's take back the clock. Let's go a little bit on your journey as you lean into these discoveries. Did you grow up spiritually minded? Like, was that in your upbringing?
I grew up Catholic, so going to church every Sunday, and
Is that right?
yeah. So I had it wasn't.
I don't know that.
That's interesting. You didn't know that. It wasn't so much spiritual at that point, and it was actually one of the things that I had to overcome was all the dogma that was then, imposed upon me from there, and the guilt and the, being subservient to a Christ that's, our savior, and that kind of thing. And it's like, it never actually resonated with me, and I didn't know why. And so that was the initial exposure. But lucky for me is that my dad was also into personal development. So in a way, and he's coming at it from like a goal orientated vantage point. And if you look back in the 80s and 90s, a lot of that stuff, like the Wayne Dyer, the Deepoks, the Marianne Williamson, the, Carolyn Mace, like all these moguls that were bringing this consciousness, what they're talking about is ancient wisdom, right? At the end of the day. But they were bringing it into a mainstream mindset, and it was more focused around, the power of positive thinking. It was at Brian Tracy, and um, you know, looking at how to manifest and go after your goals, and like it was all just like locked into that paradigm. So it was like my dad was coming in from that angle because he was very career orientated and like wanting to drive me towards uh, engineering degree for that matter. So
How old were you then when he was giving you those cassette tapes, I believe?
oh, it was at a young age. It was pretty cool because the first thing was he found a series that we can't find it to this day. I've asked him many times because I wanted to share it with my girls, but it was one of those. Well, it might have been Brian Tracy that did it, but he did a kids version of like mindfulness and positivity and this and
Wow.
he actually had characters, and this was all audio, on cassette tapes. So before it's like video and stuff, uh, and I still remember it to this day because there was a character on there that was like the whingy, whiny character that's always has excuses and complaining. And is like, that was like a metaphor of what you're not supposed to be like and how to overcome that character. And then there was other characters. And so it was a beautiful thing. So that would have been around like, I mean, when we could actually perceive that, grasp that. So probably about 9, 10. My brother would have been 7, somewhere in there. We were getting exposed to that. So that was our first taste. But then it became, and we moaned and groaned, as kids. Oh, I don't want to do that. But it stuck with me. And then my dad used it as kind of a disciplinary kind of thing because I got myself in a bit of trouble in school. So he wasn't fond of that. And some of the way to discipline me was to give me the cassette series of more of the adult stuff when I was like 11, 12, 13 in that, transitional time, and have me do reports on it. And again, there's a lot of moaning and groaning and pain in there, but it stuck with me. And little did I know that these obnoxious adults that I was listening to at the time voicing all this stuff was stuff that I was going to be spewing out 30, 40 years from then.
So it was going in. So with that kind of foundation, then leaning into it, because well, let's fast forward to when your mum passed, because you speak to that a little bit, your events and workshops. But do you mind sharing a little bit about, I guess, that period of time, because that was such a catalyst for you, on reflection now, for you to go off on this quest to search for more meaning.
No, exactly right. That was kind of that was the catalyst for me to actually come back to myself, really. Because like I alluded to, I was quite a defiant little boy, and that defiance was because I couldn't sit still in school. Like I couldn't, it just didn't, I was smart, which made it even worse because I would be finishing the homework before the teachers assigned it. And it used to upset the teachers because then I would goof around in class and get in trouble, and they'd try and discipline me, but I was getting, good marks. So it was kind of like an enigma. So, yeah, that's why I was getting exposed to this stuff. So in that, having to sit still, having to hold, it was against who I was. I was very sensitive and very like creative. My mind was just always going, and imagination was just massive, and sit in a classroom and have to look in a book and then learn these theories and stuff. It just was like killing me. And so in that, I got quite defiant. And as I got older and older, I had more reach to defy, if that makes sense, you know? It's like getting out with my mates and then having a car and like being able to do things at a greater level, having access to more, you know, alcohol and drug, you know, the typical things and distractions. And so for me, I didn't really, and what was frustrating is there was no real guidance to say, oh, you should go into a healing career, or, you know, it was, or anything to that. Like it was just, well, you're smart with math and science, you should go into it, get an engineering degree, and you can do anything with that. And so this was the point that I was in when my mom died, was at an engineering school that I didn't really want to be at. I was capable of doing it, but it was more a social experience for me and just connecting with friends and going out and drinking and like binge drinking and just really lost, I guess, lost and free. I mean, it was a time when, you know, I didn't have to have my head down and go after things. So I was lost, but then, you know, in the midst of all, I share all that with you because it was kind of the state that I was in. I wasn't really focused on the direction of my life, where I was going. I was kind of hopeless and just wandering, I guess, at the time. And then it was, I don't know what year it was in school progression, but it was a few years in. My brother had already come to school there. So I would have been there at least 3 years in uni. And I was 23 at the time. And yeah, my dad come down and I thought I was in trouble because he knocked on my apartment door and it's like, oh, what did I do now? What did I get caught doing now? And yeah, no, he said, he just dropped it out. He just says, mom's dead. Mom's gone. And it was like, you know, those moments where things just slow down and I can still feel it. It was like this contraction started in my fingertips and it was like I just clenched into a fist and it went up my arms, up my shoulders, into my heart. And it was like everything just closed down. When I just completely closed off in this anger, in this rage, in this, you know, obviously it was the pain was so great underneath that the only way I could cope was to mask it with a rage, with an anger. And so that was the initial kind of feeling. And I had to really hit bottom then to start to pull myself out. It was, you know, having that kind of a trauma and that kind of a grief, that depth of a grief and a loss, mixed with no purpose and no and and drugs and alcohol and you know, not really many coping mechanisms. It was just a downward spiral for me at that point.
Did your mum understand you at that, you know, just before that, when you were that lost, like you said, drinking, binging, kind of?
Yeah, 100%. I didn't realize how similar I was to her. You know, I was at that age where, you know, parents are idiots. Like, I'm not like you. I'm going to do everything I can not to be like you. And she was such a caring, loving person. She was a nurse by trade. And also as just her personality was a healer, was a nurse, was someone who was always helping other people. And, yeah, and she got me, you know, she was helping not only other people, but you know, myself, my friends would come over and my girlfriends would come over and hang out with my mom. Like she's that type of person. And just, yeah, she got me. She was there for me. There was a resonance that I didn't understand in myself that she was displaying. So there was a depth of connection there that was ripped away. Yeah.
So it was like, I mean, I'm just don't want to impose my thoughts on it, but it was as if one of the few people in your life truly got you and was there for you at that point was then taken away, you know?
Yeah, hands down. Because I was a weird kid. Like,
Well, nothing's changed, mate.
I know, right? Right. Yes. my imagination, the way like I was interested in this stuff, like occult stuff and psychic stuff, and it's just a weird dude. So I never really, and I didn't know where to fit in. I tried a little bit of sport and dabble with a bit of music, and like I would never found my tribe really growing up, and so I was quite, I felt isolated, felt misunderstood, and my mom was always there as a mom is, and yeah, so it was like that was my foundation, regardless of who I was pretending to be. She always saw me and always was there for me. So yeah, she's ripped away.
So well, then what happened? Did you did how did the quest begin? You said you started to spiral downward after that a bit.
Yeah, it was.
Where was rock bottom for you before you started coming out on your soul searching?
I think it was because we had access to all those pubs and lots of like there was no one stopping me from going and having 12-hour binge drinking nights and then waking up with a hangover and then going back at it again. It's like so and I was able to get by with the school enough that I wasn't stressed about that. I could just shelf that. And so it's just, I don't know when the time, well, I can remember when there was a pivot because I was, I was in the toilet at a pub and I was so like where the greatest insights always happen. Uh, that in the shower, right? Uh, and just being like, wow, I'm so drunk and high and on whatever it was at the time. And I'm like, and it was one of those moments in that cloud, in that haze, in that kind of just running from the pain, that there's that glimpse of this divinity, you know? And it's like, it sounds funny, but sitting in the stall at one of these bars and to have this insight is funny to me because, it's like the cesspool of society in there. It's like gross. The college took bar toilet. Um, but it just hit me as like, wow, there's so much more to life and that and what I'm experiencing, and I want to experience it. I don't want my mom's life to be in vain, basically, is what it came to. And it was like, and in all that despair and that darkness was like, I just killed the little boy in me. It was like, my mom was gone. So I've got to grow up. I've got to be a man and get rid of that childish, imaginative, creative little boy and get on with it. But I couldn't cope. So I was getting on with killing myself, basically. And it was in that moment of just being so messed up. And like, I remember I could hardly even sit on the toilet. I was so incapacitated. And I was like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to yourself? What's it going to take? And it's like, you're just destroying the gift of life that your mom gave you. And it's like, I was like, oh, and then it started to then circle back up. And it's fascinating, isn't it? If you hold one negative thought, you can then perpetuate more and more negative thoughts and it cascades just as easily as you can hold one positive thought. And if you hold it long enough, it starts to then lift you and create more and more positive thoughts. And that's kind of like the moment it just pivoted in that environment. In that moment, I was like, oh, I want to get to this state of feeling so blissful, so, joyous in my inebriated state in a sober way and live on purpose and then go after. Um, I mean, my mom had come to me in a vision that I wasn't ready to cope with at the time and showed me an experience beyond my five senses. So I guess in a way, in my naive way, I was using those drugs and alcohol to go to that state and and to try and reconnect with her. And it was just destroying me. So
When did she come to you in a vision?
it was a few days after she died.
So you were in full grief, shock.
Full grief. And, I it was when I was sleeping. So, but it was like, I had lived in a 2-story house. So the dream was happening downstairs. My bedroom was upstairs. And as everything was unfolding, she came to me. It was in front of me. I could reach out and touch her, but I couldn't embrace her. She had to pull away. And she opened a portal that showed all these shapes that were beyond 3 dimensions, colors beyond my light spectrum, what I could see with my eyes, like sounds that I have never been able to reproduce. And it was so profound, so amazing. And I just, it was a peace. There was an inner peace that was had at that moment, knowing that she was not actually gone. She was just in a different frequency or different reality. And, being a Catholic, I said, Mom, are you in heaven? She's like, I'm in the afterlife. First she said, and I didn't understand any of this, but I knew she was there. And when it came time to wake up, I've actually felt my consciousness move from the downstairs to the upstairs, and my body actually shot up in the bed and in a seated position. I woke up seated, and I was like, okay, that was interesting, and wrote it all down. And, I just shelved it as that was a nice dream, a nice memory or whatever. But that same vision, I later went to a medium who was channeling my mom years later. And I didn't tell anybody about that dream, by the way, at the time. And he told me that dream from her point of view.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, that's insane. So it justified even more so that she was there and that was real and there was a connection. And then, yeah, as I started to want to live, and it had to be for her at first. Like, I didn't want to live for myself. It's just fascinating. And that was a hurdle over time. It's as I was just striving to be successful, I wasn't living for me. And that's why I went into engineering and got a computer programming job and did all this stuff for years until I opened into this other stuff, which was truly me. And that's when I started to want to live for myself, not just for my mom. But yeah.
So when you say open into the other stuff, kind of, start leaning into indigenous cultures, ancient wisdom, what first attracted you to looking at different modalities outside of what we are, I guess, projected upon in the Western society?
Well, it was being on that track of finishing my engineering degree and then being in a computer job that I hated. And having the luxury of being in Los Angeles at that time. I got a job in Los Angeles of all places, and was then exposed to acting and music. And I lived with one of my old friends from my neighborhood that I grew up with was living in LA at the time, and he was in a band. He was making music, and so I joined him, and I learned to play piano, and he taught me some guitar. And we fiddled around in a band, and then I fiddled around with some acting and got into an acting school where the teacher was teaching spirituality. Basically, he didn't call it that, but the day I audited his class, he said, if there's one thing I teach in this acting class, it's this book. And he held up a little book called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. And I had that book in my bag at the time. And I was like, oh, I'm in the right place. So I spent 5 years with him every week, learning how to move emotion and energy. And it was a cathartic process. I wrote a monologue about my mom's death, and it was so freeing, so releasing. And that's when I started to realize the power of expression and the power of my voice all through that. And I started then exploring different possibilities. And my mindset was still like mainstream. It was like, well, maybe I should be a doctor. So I went to UCLA and took some classes that I didn't have in my engineering degree to hopefully apply to med school, and volunteered at a hospital. And it only took me about 18 months to be disillusioned with the entire medical system. And that led me to massage work because it was on the fringe. I could make a living or I could make money being a massage therapist in Los Angeles at the time, but not, it wasn't so far out of reach that it was woo-woo. And, and so I started there. And then that led me to actually feeling people's emotions because I was working in such a close proximity with people. And they were demanding more of me than what I could offer. So I started to explore different modalities, energy work, healing work, emotional work. There was a breath work facilitator, David Elliott, who he worked closely with Native American wisdom. And so that started then to tip me open to more indigenous cultures and yoga practices. I got exposed to Kundalini yoga at the time through friends, ecstatic dance, like these types of things were just at my doorstep being in Los Angeles. So in all of those feedback, if you look at a lot of the modern practices we do, they feed back to ancient wisdom. And so it was that gradual progression then of separating my identity from the success as a engineer into kind of almost free falling into an unknown, and then ultimately creating a career that didn't exist at the time out of what was authentic to me and what was true to me. And that's where, I started to want to explore more, go to different, I spent a lot of time in Peru working with teachers down there, and really opened me up to a lot more of the mystic experience.
Were there any, like when you look at all these modalities, and I'm thinking about people listening to this as well, it can feel overwhelming, it can feel a bit confusing, and it's not until you walk the path and really start to submerge yourself in it, I found anyway, that you start to get it. And that wisdom comes from it's an embodiment. It's not a mental thing. And were there any points on your journey where you were like, holy shit, now I get it. Like that was profound. That was, because I remember, you sometimes speak about the pain in your rib and how that rib held that grief. I feel all these things are critical for people to hear, because when the light bulb goes off, it can be a game changer.
Yeah, 100%. It's it kind of is leaning into what frustrates me about this work and how people meet this work these days is that it gets pushed aside because we, I think, are in denial that we actually need any help, because we're so self-sufficient in our world, and like we're not needing our instinct, our gut wisdom, our intuition to survive. And we're not, we can survive with our minds, basically. We can survive in, just this part of our bodies. But the whole heart and soul of who we are then is devoid in our lives. And we sit and look, and then we segment out everything as, well, there's a physical ailment, I'll take this drug or use this procedure. Or there's a emotional thing, I'll go to this therapist and talk about it. Or there's, it's like we divorce everything out and segment things, and we don't really drop in and realize that actually it's just that I've separated myself from myself. And so it was like, this is what I started to discover, is that I wasn't happy in my life. And I thought it was because of not having a purpose and the loss of my mom, and who knows what it was, but it was just like, this life was mundane. Life was boring. Is this all there is? And it was in the search for something more that then I started to have these experiences. And before I get to the ribbed one, it was I remember the first session I had with David, and he was teaching me the breath and taking me into an altered state with just a breathing technique. And his he's clairaudient, and he's able to tune into what words need to be spoken for you to shift beliefs and that kind of thing. So when you're in that altered state, in that open state, he's starting then to rewire your belief system. Just fascinating. And it was just on his table for like 15 minutes doing a breath process. And I remember the tingling in my hands and the contraction in my arms and the release of emotion and this like kind of seeing beyond my eyes. It was this profound experience that I can't really do justice to by putting words to it, but it was in that moment I was like, whoa, this shit's real. Like, it's not just because to that point I was doing, Reiki or energy healing. It was like these subtle things. And his experience that I had, or the experience I had with him was like, boom, and you're in. You're not going anywhere. And so that really piqued my interest. And that's when I started then to work more deeply with breath and in different cultures. And yeah, one such was in South America, and working with some healers there, and they were we were in the deep ceremony, and it was and what I learned from them was how they use sound and their chants, their keros, their instruments to elicit different states within your consciousness, to open you to different realities, to different portals of reality. And it was fascinating, the journeys that we would go on just through the sound. And then you had your breath to ground you, to allow you to integrate. And so it was like those two things, sound and breath, were very present. And I remember sitting in the depths of that ceremony about an hour and a half in, feeling an ache in my rib. And this was 15 years after my mom had died. So I had been on quite a journey, exploring at that point and feeling like I actually took a group there. I was leading a group of people and enrolled these healers to work with me. And so I was kind of in a facilitator and client role at the same time, which is a challenging thing. But in that I felt an ache, and I was like, oh, I've been through this. What's that? I must just been sitting for too long or something. And it started then to cascade into a sadness. And it got so apparent. That's all I was aware of was the pain in my rib and the sadness. And then as soon as I let the sadness express, it was like my mom was sitting right in front of me with this look of acknowledgement, of love, of compassion, like nothing. And she was just right there. And I realized, this is grief that I had pushed down in myself at such a depth that it had gone into my bones, into the actual rib. And that by expressing it, I sobbed. My body was sobbing. It, went from tears to just whole body convulsion, sobbing, releasing for 6 hours. And I walked out of that like a different person. And that had been stuffed down. And it's like, and that goes back to what I was initially saying, is that frustration then of how many people are walking around holding things like that.
About that every day, mate.
Right?
I mean, when people see what we see in our retreats and events, and what saddens me is that a lot of people are just not aware of it. I wasn't aware of it. I hadn't, I'm a Welshman from the valleys, mate. Like, I'm walking around with absolutely no freaking idea that any of this is possible.
No, exactly.
And nobody tells you.
No, get that new car, get that new house, fix the tiles in your bathroom, and
the new TV will sort you out.
Oh, it's because your iPhone's dated, mate. Get a new iPhone, you'll feel better. No, it's exactly right. And as you speak to that too, it's like, wow, like I was so stuck in myself. Like I didn't even know I had a body that was stuck. It was like everything was logical. Everything was brain. What do I think I want to do? And where do I think I should go? And like all that kind of stuff. And it was like, I did, 3.5 years of massage study where we're working on each other's body, different techniques, working into the muscle, into the fascia, into the tissue, and opening it up. And then I was a massage manager at a day spa of 120 massage therapists for a year and a half. And in that, I had to get like 10 massages a week for testing, for reviews, for interviews. So I'm getting my tissues, my body is getting worked, right? And if you think you can go through that and not open into the stuff that's been held there, you're kidding yourself. And it's like that was like that was a foundation then for me to start to open. I needed that much, get in there, open up before I actually started to feel my heart again, because that contraction from when my mom died and that wall of anger, of resistance was still there, and I didn't know it.
But do you feel, though, that in some ways we have to go through that to fully understand the journey and the lessons from it? Because if it's just given to us, what are we going to take? We just take it for, like human beings, we just take things for granted and we just get very complacent very quickly. Do you think you would be doing what you do now with such skill and passion and care without having gone through that metamorphosis?
No.
Right?
No, I don't believe that we have to go to the depths of pain.
No, absolutely not.
But it is a good catalyst for growth, for sure. We both witnessed that. But it did force me on a journey, and I think it was of experience. I think that's critical in this work, is to have that, to go to that depth within yourself, and then that becomes your gift. Is like what you heal within yourself, then you can be the container to hold somebody through that similar type of healing. And so that's how I've developed that sensitivity, is to be able to be with myself in that way. And it's an ever deepening process of discovery, of evolution. And that's what I think we've put on the shelf as a human race, is that we've shelved our potential in a way, and that we just, like you say, we get comfortable, we just coast. Say, well, this is what it is, and I can go maybe a little bit higher, but oh yeah, it's up and down, it kind of ebbs and flows. But the potentiality, I mean, just look at like Olympic sports. My God, like the Olympics just happened, and seeing what some of those gymnasts are doing 10 years ago, people would have balked at that. That's impossible. You can't do that as a human. And they're doing it. And it's like, what else is possible? Not just physically. What's possible mentally? What's possible psychically? What's possible, as a group, as a tribe, when we see this all the time when we bring people together, and how far they can go in those workshops within, to create a healing, to create an energy, to create a transformation within themselves that frees them of those blocks. It's like, what is possible? And so it's like that's what keeps me going, because I can learn things, and I can do things, and I can set goals on a 3D level. But what's the true potential of humanity, and what actually can I express in this life? And we only have such a limited time, but what's possible? And are you going to leave? How much of that are you going to leave on the table? It's the question. That's what scares the shit out of me, I think. It's like, while I'm learning all this stuff, I have this ability, and we're creating spaces for people to heal and for humanity to grow. And be more kind, to be more loving. It's like, I don't want it to stop. I want to give it my all. I want to be able to, you know, put down this body and say, that was a good run. I used every ounce of that body before I left it. And, yeah. And I think the measure that I strive for is how many, because Oprah talks about, or it was, who was it? I can't remember her name at the moment. Somebody that's a dear friend of Oprah's, they were talking, and she was telling Oprah, your true legacy is the people that you touch in your life and the impact you had on others. And yeah, that's my measure of success these days, is how far can this work go to, and how many people can it touch, and how many more will be inspired to live more fully in their lives.
Yeah. I'm aware of the time, my time, for about 10 minutes before I have to wrap it up. But
Yeah, I know.
I got one question for you. I'm bringing it back to sound for a minute.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, when and where did you discover the gong? Because I get to experience that every other weekend now, pretty much.
Mhm.
And it's something that's beyond words, is profound,
Mm.
especially when in a meditative state or working with the breath and you're really in that space internally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Kundalini yoga teacher training. Our teacher had somebody come in, Jay Roberts is her name, um, to share with us the gong. It's deeply infused into the practices of Kundalini yoga, is the use of mantra, the use of the gong. And she had, I don't know, a dozen of these, big gongs in the room, and she just put us through. We did a kriya, some movement, some chanting, and then laid down into shavasana, and she laid into those gongs, and that took me to a place like no other. And I remember sitting up from that experience and being like, I need that. I have to have that. Um, yeah, and it's fascinating how it actually came to be. It was I got a little chow gong, which is a Chinese gong about that big, and they're
Like a dinner plate.
yeah, like a dinner plate, and it sounds like you're hitting a garbage can lid. That's what it sounds like. Right? Doesn't have much resonance, much musicality to it. Nothing, right? Just like hitting a piece of metal, and which you are. And I was trying to find my way into this work, and what is the process. It was when the soul vibing process was developed, the work that I wrote a book about and talk about, and we share all the time, using breath and sound in a journey to take you to an altered state. I didn't really know. I was fiddling, and I was approached by one of those Groupon things. They just called me up one day and they said, you want to do a sound healing massage? I'm like, okay. Because I was doing massage and I was doing some breath, and I was working with how does this all fit together. And yeah, I sold like, I don't know, 1,800 of those things, and they give you pennies. Like it was like a $20 voucher, and I think you get like $3 off each one. I can't remember, but
How many turned up? Yeah, 18.
well, that was the beauty of it. I think a third of them would show up, and but anyway, I was doing hundreds of these things, these sessions, and that chow gong was in it, and I was banging over people's heads, and it was a bit naive of me, I think, at the time, but it really started to fine tune what I was doing, and the money that I made from that gave me enough excess cash to buy my big 32-inch symphonic gong. And as soon as that sucker came in, I just played that every night, and it opened my consciousness into different portals. The resonance that was there, I was starting to see things, hear things, able to like disengage that conscious mind and drop into a depth like no other. It was amazing. I was talking to my mom. I was talking to spirits. I was like Gollum was coming and running around my ceiling, and it was like weird shit was going on. Printers were turning off and on, and they weren't plugged in. All kinds of weird stuff was happening in the center when I was playing with this at night, and it was from that I started then to understand that that is critical. There needs to be an explosive kind of catalyst. So using active breath, using the gong to disengage and to dislodge people from their attachment to their minds.
It does that.
It does that.
Well, it's a true sound journey. And I want to emphasize the word journey, because it really is. It takes you on this. Because there's such a visceral experience to it. Like you're saying, you're using an active breath. You're using sound in combination that it transports you somewhere. And like you say, it allows you for that mind to switch off. And then once you go, and then it catapults you off into the other aspects of the journey. It really is like a slingshot.
It is. Yeah. And that's how it was designed. And that's why I called it soul vibing initially, because it takes you to a place where you can resonate with the vibration of your soul. And I do believe that is why we are here, to bring that soul resonance into form. And so, like you say, a visceral experience, we're fully immersed in the breath, and the sound is working on the nervous system, working on the cells in the body. So you're fully embodying the expansive consciousness that is resonating at those frequencies that you tap into as you shift your mind. And so that, in essence, then is like, to me, it's like building a bridge. The more I practiced that process, the more I was able to go into that state and bring that wisdom, that soul wisdom, into my conscious mind, because there was a bridge that was built. And that, to me, is what it's all about, is finding the soul wisdom that's wanting to move through you, and letting that soul inspire you instead of being driven by the fears, the anxieties, the beliefs that we hold within our mind. It's like, and that changes everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I feel like I could keep unpacking more and more and more as we go, mate. But I'm going to have to wrap up the podcast in a moment.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, you get a few stories over 50 years of being on the planet. So
yeah, totally. Anything you want to add before we do wrap it up? We
covered some ground, didn't we?
Mm.
Yeah, I think I would just want to share like one little practice. I think we offer so many practices, and I think a lot of what we spoke about can sound like this out there kind of thing, and it's vast and it's large, but going back to that, utilizing the breath. In one of my courses in the membership, it's a 6-stage process, and the first stage is silence, and the second stage is observation. So sitting in silence and observing, and then ultimately you go to understanding, and then you nurture that in, and you design your life from that. So that creates the acronym SOUND. But silence and observing are critical components of what we're missing in our lives. And I feel it's, just would invite anyone who wants to explore this to start to tap into that little bit of sound and little bit of breath by a simple practice of just, before you get out of bed, just take like 2 to 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be long. And just listen to your breath. Just let it breathe you and let it move, and just be with that. And as you're with it, you'll more than likely feel sensations in the body. You're definitely going to have thoughts come into your head. You might even over time notice emotions that want to release. Whatever it is, just observe it, just be present with it as you're sitting and listening to that breath. And then the next step is start to move, start to take command of those emotions that are wanting to flow, those sensations in the body that are wanting to form you, by just giving it a bit of a hum. So you can then take the exhale and give it a hum and just let that hum soothe your body, soothe your mind, and soothe the heart of what's wanting to express. And just that little practice will start to then open to insights and information that will start to guide and inspire your life forward. So I just invite people to play with that. That's
I do it in the sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my go-to.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And one question, mate, are you giving life to your YouTube channel? Is that happening?
It is happening.
It is happening.
I am putting more and more content out there, wanting to just reach more and more people with simple gong sessions and sound sessions. And
I'll put the link to the YouTube below, but it's that Gong guy, right?
yes, that gong guy.
Yeah. So head over, subscribe, and
Oh, thanks.
check out the Gong. No worries.
Yeah,
And
get it out there.
yeah, well, if people want to come and experience the work, we're running a retreat in Byron Bay in January. We're in Croatia in October. This should be out before then. We're going to be in Bali end of April, early May.
Mm-hmm.
Come and join us. It really attracts a certain kind of person, which is beautiful and connected. Yeah. Links.
Hear your alarm in the background, mate.
Yeah, he's ready. My son is on all cylinders. He's made a few guest appearances on the podcast now.
Has he?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Start on young, mate.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, right, for bringing me on and diving into that bit more.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's fantastic to hear. I learned a lot today, which is saying something, considering how much time I spend with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Legend. Thanks,
See you
mate.
soon.
Cheers.